Welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, the local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And please share this episode with a friend or colleague. I am your host, Owen Lefebvre, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. Super excited about today's guest, the one and only legendary land use attorney, Ron Weaver, the Weave.
Thank you.
Ron, thanks for gracing us with your presence in your retirement.
Thank you, Owen.
I'd say you have a little bit more time on your hands, but yet again, you're the most retired person I know, and I see you everywhere. So, what does retirement look like for Ron Weaver?
I'm loving it. I'm teaching a course at Stetson Law School on my field, land use law, and I'm loving preparing for it and trying to get those students motivated to enjoy land use law as much as I did.
So, tell me a little bit about that. How do you get them motivated?
Well, I'm finding ways that Florida's land use law over the last 100 years has evolved to something that they can use to help their clients as friends, to help their clients who are developers, but also to help their neighbors who need to protect their neighborhoods, because Florida's land use law was meant to help not just to order planning, but also to enable neighborhoods to protect themselves.
That is it's a touchy subject right now in today's environment, and people trying to find a way to get additional density, but balance that with not disrupting, the traditional neighborhood that has been built really probably since the 50s, right?
Exactly.
Would you say in the 50s is when kind of the land use law started to change? And,
it did.
So what was the impetus for that?
The impetus was the enormous growth. In 1960, Florida was the 16th largest state. We had grown so dramatically that we had to deal with growth management finally, and to deal with the fact that roads were not coming along. We had no state income tax. Therefore, we weren't building enough roads, enough water, enough sewer. And so these laws were passed in order to make sure that developers provide infrastructure and not just get new houses.
Got it. So, but you made a transition. You started as a transactional attorney.
I did. And banking like you.
Yes.
Only banking law. And congratulations on the Stonier Graduate School, University of Pennsylvania. Your banking degree from Stonier at Wharton and University of Pennsylvania.
They finally made a bank out of me after all these years.
Well, I was a banking lawyer and chaired an international real estate finance conference in London, and was the planner of a simultaneous environmental seminar in New York for all the bankers and banking lawyers in the country, and a couple in Orlando. While I was chairman of the American Bar Association Banking Law Committee, Real Estate Finance Subcommittee.
I'm going to pivot a little bit. How do you maintain how did you maintain your schedule? Because you worked, countless hours, and then, I would see at industry events, and you're planning events, for bankers and for real estate, for NAIOP. How did you maintain that schedule?
A very supportive family. And and two secretaries from my first 20 years practicing. Okay. So one had one half of the world, and the other had another half of the world, and together we made it happen. Plus I had 10, 20, 30, 40, now 155 lawyers in the firm when I retired, and we all divided it up and had fun together. And so I was really the easy one. They were doing all the work.
You figured it out. It was a good balance. It seemed like. The other thing, Ron, I wanted to ask you is I had Bob Buckhorn on the podcast. So when I think of people that have great name recognition, or the ability, social memory, and I told him, Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, LBJ, Ron Weaver. Bob Buckhorn's definitely in the category. But is there a certain skill or technique you use to remember people's names? Because, you don't forget a name, but I feel like you go through a process of putting them with a location or tying them into, a relationship.
I do. I kept about 1 million 3x5 cards, and I would simply, after a meeting, I would pull out a card and discreetly after the meeting would write down names and details and what we talked about, what they might be interested in that I could find maybe for them the next morning, maybe that night, during that 20th hour of each of those easy days. And then I would, I was in the Atlanta airport, and I ran into a gentleman, and I said, Mr. Wishalewski, and he said, yes, that's my name. I said, I'm Ron Weaver from Tampa. We met 5 years ago in Tampa. He said, I've only been to Tampa once. I said, I know. We rode down the elevator together from the University Club. He said, well, how did you remember my name? I said, it was easy. I simply took a wishing well from the first grade, which is up on the wall, and then the letter A, which is nearby, and the A through the Z, a picture of Lou Gehrig, and I leaned a ski up against it. Try to forget that. And he said, I can use that. So it's really those 4 images for the most romantic image for each of those 4 sounds. So that was Mr. Wishalewski of Atlanta, Georgia.
That's incredible. So what was my memory?
Owen Lefebvre. That's really easy. Jesse Owens minus the S. And Lefebvre, is that French? Yeah.
It is French. So
for the favorite banker with the beard. Okay.
Didn't always have the beard, though.
I know. I remember.
Grew it in COVID. Talk about the transition from being a transactional attorney to land use attorney.
That was relatively easy because in the 1980s, that's what was most needed in Tampa, and very few lawyers were doing it. And so I basically took a field that was exploding and was very blessed to be able to jump into it in the early 1980s when Florida exploded, and so did Florida land use law. And fortunately or unfortunately, the laws were changing just as dramatically as the number of people coming into the state with the number of laws being passed on the subject. So we had to figure out and process and apply. So
I would put you, if there was a Mount Rushmore in terms of just land use attorneys or folks that have had a dramatic impact on how Tampa and this area has developed, you'd be on that.
You're too kind. Thank you.
Well, no, you're not take my word for it. I think a lot of other people would agree. But who else would be on that Mount Rushmore?
Ted Taub was the original. One of the originals was Ted Taub. And David Mechanic is still up there. Yeah. And the late Vin Marchetti, one of my law partners, who unfortunately passed away. All Rhea Law, now president of the University of South Florida, Keith Breckelmeyer. There are so many fantastic folks that have practiced in this field a lot better than me.
I don't know about that, but no, I think that's a great group and a good Mount Rushmore. In terms of how a development started, I was having a conversation earlier today about a small town, developing and what comes first. Does the investment in the infrastructure come first? Is it, the people moving in, which then, lends itself to, retail and industry and office? I mean, organically, how would you say, what is the natural progression of how a development is created?
I accepted a job in Tampa in 1973 to start in 1974. And we flew back up to Boston, where we were in law school, and turned on the news. I was delighted I'd accepted an offer for a job in Tampa. And turned on the news, and there's 60 Minutes. And 60 Minutes has an expose on Tampa's lack of water and sewer, causing a moratorium on new building in the town and country subdivisions because of lack of water, lack of sewer, lack of roads. And I'm thinking, what have I done? And the answer is what I've done is I've set up a 50-year career in Florida land use law trying to deal with just those problems of answer your question. Infrastructure needs to come first, but for the first 30 years that I practiced, infrastructure was not being provided in advance. And then some tough laws came along that required infrastructure.
So as we're driving around town, your fingerprints are all over this community. What are some of the projects that you were involved in that you're proud of?
Well, there were 16,000 acres that we helped a big New York investment firm acquire on this line between Flagler and St. Johns County, with about 5 miles of interstate in one county and 5 miles of interstate in another county. And I loved watching all 16,000 acres come together, and I loved the 5,000 acres approval for the Trinity, Pasco, and a little bit of Hillsborough, a little bit of Pinellas. And so I was just giving a speech up there about 3 months ago, and I love going in there and seeing every inch of that 5,000 acres filled with millions of square feet of retail and restaurants and hospitals and thousands of houses because of the 1981-82 work of for Dr. Jim Gill's developing the Trinity subdivision, and then about 5 of these high-rises downtown and West Shore, and about hundreds of shopping centers and 50s of thousands of houses.
So I had once heard a story of, I guess, Tampa City Center when it was being the predecessor building that was there, whatever that was, and them trying to aggregate the parcels and what is now the Chase Bank that was kind of the last remaining parcel.
Yes.
And everybody watching the other property being demolished for Tampa City Center to be built, and kind of jokingly they were hoping that it was going to fall over on the Chase building.
I remember that.
What
Yeah.
was do you recall anything about the negotiations and why that property didn't sell and why it's just kind of sitting out there on an island?
I don't recall all those details. I do
No?
not. Thank you. And I wouldn't say if I did.
I was just going to say, is that selective memory? So
There was some arm twisting going on at the time. I understand that George Gage brought the tenant, which was General Telephone,
Okay.
now Verizon, and that Bill Poe brought the muscle, so there's a plaque for him in the courtyard there at One Tampa City Center. And then Fred Church had the savings and loan and a bunch of money and a bunch of arms to twist. And then Chester Ferguson apparently helped twist some arms to make sure that enough pieces, maybe not quite as many as you just asked about, but those pieces came together beautifully because you had Billy Poe's political muscle as the mayor, and you had Chester Ferguson of the Likes Empire twisting arms with respect to the nature of getting it assembled, Fred Church's money from the savings and loan, and George Gage brought the lease from General Telephone, now Verizon, and basically it all came together.
That is, it's fascinating too. And I think, was it Billy Poe that said like, hey, this is going to be the center of downtown? We
Yes.
need 4 high rises. And
Absolutely.
One Tampa City Center wasn't the first one built, was it?
No, it was competing at the time with the Tampa Electric Company building being built over the old Citizens National,
Okay.
and a competition between Jim Cusack and Dick Beard for their respective now Fifth Third building was Dick Beard's contestant, simultaneous with the Mack building, which is now the county center, which was Jim Cusack's entry. First one of the sky, bought the other one, seafood dinner at Cedar Key.
Who won?
I think Beard got there a couple of days early.
Dick got there? Okay. One of the other things I recall you being actively involved with, and now maybe is coming to fruition, is the urban service boundary.
Yes.
I felt like you've been very vocal on that for the almost 25 years that I've been in banking, and it
Yes.
seems like it may happen.
Yes.
What has prevented that from happening up until this point?
A delicious community activist named Cam Obering,
Okay.
the late Cam Obering of Thonotosassa, and Jan Platt on the county commission, and a few friends. For about 20 years, Cam Obering would come to every hearing and resist new development in Thonotosassa on behalf of her neighbors to protect the integrity, the quality of life of Thonotosassa. And as a result, they didn't extend the urban service area line, and she protected Thonotosassa for 25 or 30 years. She's passed away, and there's now talk of extending the urban service area line out so that development can occur between here and Plant City in its natural place, instead of letting all that development go to Pasco or to Lakeland or
Right.
to Bradenton.
So it was just as simple as one person and their determination and their passing.
In a way, it's really a tribute and a salute to her and her protecting her neighborhood. It's why I often admire the folks that have come out against us if they come out for the right reasons on behalf of their friends and neighbors and the heart of their community. I have admired them and told many of them so. That they may have slowed down some of our developers a time or 5, but they also endeared themselves to me as brave citizens who would come out and protect their neighborhood, protect their children and their grandchildren's playgrounds and safe streets.
I have mixed feelings about it. And I think for all the reasons you just stated, yes, I'm very, very admirable. And someone needs to fight the cause, because you also, when we allow developers to run rampant, there needs to be some control and thoughtfulness as to how development is done. But then again, when you look at the natural development and where things are developing, oftentimes I am frustrated by the lack of political will by our elected officials.
It is getting stronger in the city of Tampa, and there are neighborhoods now that have actually spoken up and been very effective the last 2 or 3 years in getting some neighborhoods protected by the city council people. Some of them have declared effective protection of neighborhoods in many cases, especially in the city of Tampa.
Sure.
And for a while, the county as the one I just cited, for about 10, 15 years there, the county of Hillsborough became more circumspect, more thoughtful, more requiring of infrastructure before development and protecting the environment forever.
No, I would agree. So in your, I guess, professional opinion, as you've seen everything develop, what needs to happen in order to preserve those communities, but still provide for all the density and population that is. I mean, whether we want it to or not, it's coming, right? So we need to find a place to put it and thoughtfully put it.
We need transit, and we need both kinds. We need buses and eventually light rail, and we need to put development intensity on the transit and the light rail wherever possible in order to concentrate a ridership that will enable us to get the transit built, in order to concentrate people on the transit, and that will help save the lands that are not so close to the transit, to the buses, and to the light rail, in order to protect both, but also to preserve the density, because we're the fastest growing state in the nation, ahead of even New York and California.
How come we can't figure out transportation?
That's been a problem that I know Jeff Bennett gave a speech about a year or two ago as he was leaving his development to Bill Gates' team, and he said the same thing as you just implied, which is, of all the things we've struck out about for our children and our grandchildren the last 20 years, it has been the transportation funding courage. But then we found it in 2018 with 57% of us yes, but then it was thrown out by a technicality of the Supreme Court. And that was a sad day, as have been 3 or 4 times that we failed to get our transportation funding for many reasons of political will and technicalities in the courts. But we have to keep trying.
How do we overcome it?
Well, we need to make up for lost time, like an airplane pilot gets in the air and says, I'm going to get you to New York on time. We're 18 minutes late getting away. I'm going to make it up in the air. We need to make it up in the air. We need to take the next opportunity for transportation, including the community investment tax, on the ballot in November to be renewed, and take sources of money like that and spend them very wisely and make it up in the air and still get ourselves mobility.
I like it. Good analogy. So you are a historian to some degree. I mean, tell us some stories about you're on the circuit right now, if you will.
I am.
Going around sharing how the history of Tampa, how Tampa developed.
Absolutely.
Take us through a little bit of that history.
Well, thank you. I believe that Major League Baseball was very tough on Frank Morsani and jerked him around, and he eventually even filed bankruptcy. Now, he came out of it and has made $20 million donations for great philanthropy, for great USF Health Center, et cetera, but not until he had filed bankruptcy, because he was jerked around by Major League Baseball in 2 or 3 different instances, and he has yet to go to a Tampa Bay Rays game because they jerked him around so badly. But Vince Naimoli got in there and fought, but at the very last minute, the owners jerked the price of an expansion up from $95 million, which it had been, up to $125 million. They went ahead and paid it, and we got baseball at Tampa Bay. So it's been scandalous the way Tampa Bay has been treated. Secondly, there was a fellow named Hackley. Hackley bought this fourth of Florida.
Okay.
Richard and Robert Hackley. He was a rich lawyer in New York, and he was in Madrid on business, and he heard that this sixth of Florida, including this area, was for sale. So he bought it. And his son went to Jacksonville, hired 16 folks to come down and build this beautiful house where the convention center is now in Tampa.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Fort Brooke was chosen for that site as well. So Colonel Brooke, to start Fort Brooke in 1824, used Hackley's house instead of sleeping in the scrub in a tent or something. And the Supreme Court ruled that Hackley was 18 days too late, that the United States and Spain had entered into a treaty, and that Hackley's grant of his property was 18 days too late. So he lost all of this sixth of Florida.
Wow.
And that was Richard and Robert Hackley, and there have been no real estate disputes since.
Wow. But did Morsani own the convention center property?
Later in life?
Later in life.
I'm not sure he had the Tampa Convention Center property.
I feel like Morsani
He had
was
17, I think, car dealerships, and was president of the United States Chamber of Commerce and a prince of a great man. And Carol and Frank Morsani were at a children's home meeting, and they were talking to Carl and Pat Riggs, and he was provost at USF. And they were saying how we don't need to give any money to USF because USF gets all this money from the students on the state. And Pat and Carl Riggs at the Children's Home Board at a table like this said, no, as a matter of fact, only about 22% comes from the state. And we have to charge tuition that is affordable. And as a result, we rely on donors. And so they've given $20 million to the USF health facility for our med school downtown. And I think 5-10 million for other causes, including Straz Performing Arts Center and all kinds of ways that Frank Morsani has been a huge player. And Frank and Carol Morsani are my heroes.
No, incredibly generous, and certainly have their fingerprints on Tampa. How did the convention center get developed then? Because one of the things that I was always, I grew up partially in Wisconsin, and then a couple of years in D.C., and then came down here when I was in high school. And as I became I stayed here professionally, and one of the first things I looked at as a professional was, it's amazing that it's on the water, but it's landlocked. We have no way to grow. And why would Tampa put it in a location that we couldn't grow? And for some reason, someone told me maybe there was a land swap, but that Morsani had something to do with it being at its current location.
Well, he may have been, but as I recall, when the Tampa Convention Center was being sited, that was the location of the old Customs House.
Okay.
And as a result, being an old Customs House, it meant the assemblage had to include the federal government and a lot of other governments in that neighborhood. So as a result, I think the Tampa Convention Center ended up with lands that the city, had to offer, and that's where we sited our Tampa Convention Center, is the land that was available, and after we tore down the Customs House.
Okay, fair enough. Tell me about Mrs. Conrad.
Pardon?
Your fourth grade teacher. What impact did Miss Conrad have in your life?
In the third grade, we had a substitute teacher, and thanks for asking. And the third grade teacher passed away, and so we had a substitute. And the substitute was reading a book, and I gave up on studying, started getting C's, and I was pretty much out of the academic business for life. And Mrs. Mary Conrad.
You're ready to give up right then. Huh?
In the next grade, in the fourth grade, Mrs. Mary Conrad saw a little something in me that I didn't even see, and suddenly she started letting me read my papers to the whole class, then go down and read my papers to the other classes. And I got the bug for reading my stuff to everyone else like this. And she saw something in me I didn't even see in myself, and she blossomed my career, and I've been working academically hard at it 20 hours a day ever since, including for Stetson Law School land use law course.
Wow, so you really you feel like she was instrumental in changing your life.
Completely turned it around, completely.
Now, I guess, have you taken that and tried to mentor other people?
We have. We've seen about 4,800 people come through the last 16 years. Real Estate Live's now called Career Rebound, which has met 705 times, helped about 4,800 people back to work. We have a meeting on July 17th at 9 a.m. at Corporate Center 1, Suite 122, at which we will help a bunch of folks to get back to work. And then we have a last hour is Leave Your Game Face at Home. It's basically emotional support for the last hour. We give them free breakfast and lunches and stuff. And we've had 4,800 people come through, and we've had about 705 of these meetings, Career Rebound, formerly known as Real Estate Lives.
That's incredible. And can you talk about the origin story? So it started during the Great Financial Crisis.
It did. In 2008, Lehman failed, and the real estate community had 30,000 people out of work in real estate. So a bunch of us were sitting around one day and talking about, what are we going to do about it? Nobody said anything. So the next time we were together, I said, what are we going to do about this? Tens of thousands of people are laid off in our business. We senior statesmen ought to be doing something, shouldn't we? And Bill Eschenbaugh, the precious dirt dog, said, Colorado shale. And I said, of course, the answer is Colorado shale. He had been out there with his lovely wife, and they had seen a sign that said $35 working, in the Colorado shale industry. And I said, what we need to do? We need to take every job that's in Tampa and go give that job to somebody by finding where all of the jobs here. And I remember my dad had to go to West Virginia from North Carolina in order to find a job during the Great Depression. And the same is true of each of the jobs we started finding people in these 4,800 people. So basically we started in honor of my dad and his having to, go 200 or 300 miles to find the nearest job. We started finding the nearest job for those 4,800 people.
Nearest, right? So
yes,
we weren't sending
nearest.
people to Colorado to do shale?
Sometimes you got to go wherever the job is. We're thinking of that young guy who's got his sweet young new family, and he's looking around saying, I don't find any job anywhere in Tampa. And basically we say, here's where the nearest job is. And he goes out there in the cold, working to save his family, wherever it is. We'll find it closer by, but wherever it is, God bless his precious soul, we'll find him a job somewhere.
So, tell me about that process of trying to source jobs. You basically became a job placement firm.
For free. Right. It was really fun to watch the way jobs started coming. It was unbelievable. The first job needed was for a little 20-year-old who had been at a title company for 2 weeks, and she was laid off first, of course.
Of course. Right.
So we found her a nanny job, and it paid just as much. A guy was building Walmarts. They stopped building all the Walmarts. So we found one being built in Wauchula. They couldn't stop. It was too far along. It was half done. So they finished. So he went down and finished for the next 5 months. He finished the Walmart in Wauchula. And every job was just like that. We found a guy who was working for a Beck construction company. He was laid off. He was a junior guy. He was a fantastic young veteran. And we had in mind his resume. And we found in his resume a course he'd taken, a magnificent real estate course. And so we said, call that company and see if you can teach it. He'd been a good student. He called the company, and they gave him a $100,000 job in Dubai teaching that very same course that he had aced when he was there, being the first guy laid off from the Beck construction company. But every job was just like that, all 4,800 of them.
So then it's carried on and evolved.
Yes.
So tell me about its kind of current day iteration. And
we had 24 folks a couple of weeks ago, and we meet at least monthly, and we have socials, and we have pancake breakfast during the year. Jenny Steinbrenner gave us 250 baseball tickets.
Okay.
Todd Lewicki, when he was here at the Lightning, and Jeff Vinnick together gave us 100 Lightning tickets, so all of our people could take their families to see the Lightning. But we've had people surround us with love in order to help people back to work and back to self-esteem with respect to emotional support.
Sure. So coaching, emotional support, counseling to a certain degree. Are we still working on the job placement piece of it? Absolutely. We still have a job board, careerrebound.org, and we've helped find fives of thousands of job offerings the last 15 years on the website, careerrebound.org. And a lot of them are unique. They're not just something everybody else has. They're unique opportunities. And, of course, we have the network, and we made 75,000 phone bank calls to make sure that we were checking in on them and letting them know what we knew and what they needed that minute. Okay. Now, it's been a tremendous asset, and I know you've helped, thousands of people, and I've known some folks that during that period of time that, we were laid off from real estate jobs or banking, and sent them your way, and they found themselves in good hands. And so thank you for that service.
Thank you. We saw you send us a lot of good folks, and we also so you find a lot of good jobs for us. Thank you.
Yeah, we all try to do our part, but you were carrying the big load on your shoulder. So thank you for that. Ron, you've been here for so long and have been such really just a critical piece of seeing the community develop. How would you describe how the city has changed, how the culture has changed over the period of time that you've been here?
I think in these 50 years, Owen, that it has changed dramatically. I think that 50 years ago, the town was probably a traditional Southern town with some inspiration, more from Chicago than New York with respect to sort of great lifestyle and good, solid ethics and integrity. But it had gone through a crime era in the 1920s and 30s where there were gangland slayings. From 1928 to 1958, there were 30 gangland slayings. So Tampa was getting over an era of crime and finding itself in a place of integrity again and working hard at that integrity and welcomeness. It let new people know that they really were welcome. There was not this old guard that said, you're not in the right name, with the right school, with the right place. You are welcome here if you have talent. You're welcome here if you have energy. You're welcome here if you have good intentions. You're welcome here if you bring something. And I think that's what, over the last 50 years, I've watched as that has blossomed. And Tampa has become not just a welcoming town. It has become a town of merit, not a town of old guard and what's your last name and what's your maiden name.
So you don't think, as we've really experienced this boom the last 4 years or so, that we're losing some of that, or do you feel that we?
I think we're keeping it. I really do. I think that we still believe in the newcomer. We still know the newcomer really is us, and that we treat the newcomer the way we wanted to be treated. And as a result, I believe most newcomers sense that. We're the number one net in-migration state in Florida, and Tampa Bay is one of the top 2 or 3 net in-migration cities in the country. Of the hundreds of great cities in America, Tampa is top 3 of the cities to which people want to move because of that attitude and that receptiveness to what they have to offer.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Is we've always had that I-75 corridor, and I think maybe it's not so relevant today of people just putting everything back in the station wagon, and we're heading down to Tampa, Florida from Chicago or Milwaukee or St. Louis. But, it is that Midwest feel, that welcoming feel. And I would agree with you. I mean, I think even though we've continued to grow and we're really attracting people from all over. I was amazed at how many California plates you see.
And even New York. New York doesn't just come to Miami anymore. As a matter of fact, Miami became a little pricey and a little crowded, and as a result, we actually began to show them the water. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we showed them a better price point, and our price point's increasing dramatically, but it's catching up to the point of the fact that we really do kind of compete now with Miami for even the New York talent and the international talent, unlike 40, 50 years ago when Miami had an advantage there. So I believe the whole world is cognizant of Tampa's merit and of Tampa's receptiveness and Tampa's willingness to give somebody a chance here.
Seeing the city evolve all these years, what is your prognosis? What is your forecast for Tampa for the next 15 years, Ron?
I think because of the balance that we're achieving with neighborhoods protecting themselves the way we just discussed, I think that for the next 15 years that we're probably going to see our people get along because our people are seeing that their government officials are listening to them, that the government officials are trying to balance these competing interests in ways that not just welcome the newcomers, the way we just discussed, but there's also something very vital in the DNA of New Tampa. Not just North Tampa, but of the newest of Tampa's sensations. And the newest of Tampa's sensations is not only do we welcome those folks who are coming here and welcome them with their merit and recognize their merit, but we also realize that those people are not only bringing talents and bringing money and bringing jobs and bringing cultural and educational and other opportunities, that those folks are finding that Tampa is a place where there's nothing that is really impossible. Tampa can tackle just about any major subject. We have to catch up on transportation.
Need to speed the plane up. Yep.
But we can catch up on transportation, and then there's absolutely nothing in the world that's holding us back. The way someone has said that New York and L.A. and Houston and Atlanta and Chicago especially, those 5, all found their moments when there was no one in the world that could compete with what they had to offer, and that's where Tampa is on the edge right now for the next 15 years of being a city where you'll go and you'll look not just at New York, which is losing folks, at L.A., which is losing folks, at Houston, which is even, at Atlanta, which is a little even, Nashville, Charlotte, Austin, Tampa. Why Tampa? Tampa, over all those other 8 big, good choices historically the last 50 years, is that one city that has found itself, will fix its transportation problems, and once it has, will be able to take on the world and invite the world to come share with Tampa this welcoming of all the great new talent. So there's nothing that keeps Tampa from being the greatest city in the country in 15 or 20 or 25 years, making Atlanta and New York and LA and Houston jealous the way New York and California already are.
Wow. I think you missed your calling. You should have been mayor at some point in time. Ron, if people want to find you in your retirement, do you want to direct anybody in any particular location?
Absolutely. Just email me at rweaver1002@gmail.com, especially if you've got some thoughts on how you can help somebody back to work, or you've other thoughts. I'd love to help you if I can, but it's rweaver1002@gmail.com.
Simple. No,
Simple.
This has been a pleasure, Ron. So
Thank
you so much for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me. Best to Jessica Muroff, your precious wife, heading our United Way.
I appreciate that. I will share that with her. If you have any questions or a future show idea or would like to be a sponsor, you can send us a message at moneymarket@bankoftampa.com or find us on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and on Instagram at bankoftampa.com, and of course online at bankoftampa.com. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you around in the Money Market.